Dear President Nicolás Maduro, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, dear Nicolás, it is always great and exciting to be in the beloved Caracas, in the land of Chavez, the eternal commander, in the hearts of the Latin American peoples. And it is also good and exciting to be in these sacred places with the brothers and friends of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America, commemorating and transcending moments of our common history. Dear Presidents, Commander Daniel Ortega Saavedra and Luis Arce Catacora, esteemed Prime Ministers Ralph Gonsalves, Roosevelt Skerrit, Gaston Brown, esteemed representatives of the sister Republic of Honduras, to whose President Xiomara Castro, I extend fraternal greetings. Dear Malki and representatives of the Palestinian state, to whom I reiterate our strongest solidarity of the Cuban people and government. That solidarity that we offer every single day to the hundreds of Palestinian students that are in Cuba. Comrade Jorge Arriaza, Executive Secretary of ALBA-TCP, heads of delegations and representatives of the nations that make up our alliance, distinguished guests, members of grassroots movements, participants. 20 years have passed from the memorable evening of December 14, 2014 in Havana, when Fidel and Chavez sealed in an embrace the beginning of ALBA, an emancipating process that time has been transforming in that embrace of our peoples. 5 years later, ALBA-TCP achieved an international dimension with the incorporation first of Bolivia and Nicaragua, and later of Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the first 3 countries of the English-speaking Caribbean that honored us with their participation. With the subsequent incorporations of St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, and St. Lucia, the alliance strengthened its voice and regional scope until it became what it is today, a space for fraternity, solidarity, cooperation, respect, unity, struggle for the interests of the dispossessed, the voice of those who are not heard, a space for the defense of the just causes of the world against imperialism and regional oligarchies. Today, we are joined by another summit of ALBA-TCP, a landmark in the battle for the defense of our America and social justice, for a better possible world that we all desire. Not a single time we have missed the date, and we will never miss the date to the cause of Latin American integration that so many dreams and projects are to be created. Dreams and projects that Fidel and Chavez fostered and materialized as nobody did since the times of Bolivar, to give response to the aspirations of millions of people. And those who follow in their footsteps, we need to foster and materialize with the same willpower when the times for our nations are not less challenging. The road has not been easy. The willpower of each of us to see the progress of ALBA-TCP allowed for this alliance to be consolidated into a process of inclusive integration that is distinguished with the coordination of actions to face the common dangers, by always placing the well-being, development, and prosperity of our peoples at the center of our decisions. Esteemed heads of state and government, friends, the threats to the security and stability of several of our countries have motivated The celebration of several meetings of this alliance this year to exchange on the very complex international and regional situation that we face. As Army General Raúl Castro Ruz said at the 15th ALBA-TCP summit, we are at a crucial stage of our history in which a setback at a regional scale would have a very negative impact on our peoples. Today, the system of international relations suffers from the imbalances of an unjust, unequal, and exclusionary international order. We are witness to the promotion of hate speech and violence, the encouragement of extremism, and the return to the old and not fully superseded mechanisms of imperialist domination. In addition to the attempted coup d'etat and the persecution of left-wing and progressive political figures, there is a ferocious media machinery intended to sow terror and lies. The Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny are not old theories from the 19th century. The expansionist and hegemonic concepts are more valid than ever in Latin America and the Caribbean. Imperialism and oligarchies will always have the perverse objective to divide our peoples, sowing enmity among the governments of our region with the purpose of limiting the scope of public policies of a social nature, take hold of the valuable natural resources of this amazing geography, and undermine the progress of Latin America and Caribbean integration that would deepen our independence. They ignore international law and the most elementary rules of coexistence through the imposition of force, unilateralism, and blackmail. A profound reform of the current international order is needed, in which solidarity and cooperation prevail over differences. It is indispensable to recover the value of multilateralism, which is necessary to advance towards a new order in which the countries of the South can participate on equal footing in decision-making processes at a global scale. We must put an end to this possession, to put an end to the philosophy of war, as Fidel said in one of his speeches at the United Nations. Colonialism, neocolonialism, growing fascism, and any other expression that threatens international peace and security come from that desire of possession and control, and the permanent attempt to dispossess others from their territories, their assets, and even their lives. The need for an international financial architecture that closes the abysmal gap that today separates the North and the South, that provides fair treatment to developing countries in the decision-making process and access to sources of financing is increasingly evident. There is an urgent need, as never before, of full respect for the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, particularly the sovereign equality of states, the self-determination of the peoples, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the rejection of the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The unwavering willingness and efforts of all for unity, integration, and peace are required. In this regard, we ratify the absolute relevance of the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, in which we affirm our commitment to banish the use and threat of the use of force from the region forever. The dramatic and precipitated developments that took place in Syria that provoked a change in regime in that Arab nation are part of a dangerous and risky remodeling of the region of the Middle East at the service of the interests of the United States, Israel, and the West. We make a call upon preserving sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the independence of Syria as the unity of its people. Esteemed heads of state and government, friends, It is extremely alarming, the growing trend to the application of unilateral coercive measures against the countries that do not submit to the imperial hegemon, causing intentional damages and politically motivated against the sovereignty of the states. They violate the principle of non-intervention in the internal affairs and stop the efforts of nations in the promotion of full enjoyment of human rights. Once again, we demand the full, immediate, and unconditional elimination of all unilateral coercive measures. This is a historical claim of the international community set forth in the resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, as well as in various declarations of the non-aligned movement, the Group of 77 plus China, and the Group of Friends in Defense of the United Nations Charter. Cuba has been imposed for 62 years the most severe and prolonged system of unilateral coercive measure ever applied against any nation. It is a deliberate act of economic warfare of a powerful empire against a small developing nation. It is a massive, flagrant, and systematic violation of the human rights of all Cubans, and arouses the almost unanimous rejection of the international community. Since 2019, the blockade against Cuba has escalated to an extreme dimension, which is much more cruel and inhumane. It is not only expressed in high costs of material and financial resources, but also attacks the everyday life of our nation. The prolongation of this policy in time has an immeasurable psychological cost that brutally impacts the Cuban families, fracturing them, dividing them, and torturing them. And as these policies are executed, their designers are executors, cynically accuse the Cuban government of damaging the people with the lack that the American government has provoked. Its effects have been further reinforced with the arbitrary inclusion of Cuba in the State Department's unilateral list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism. This is an unfounded designation, void of any basis, authority, or international backing whatsoever, attempting to justify and tighten the siege against the Cuban Revolution. It is not enough to acknowledge that Cuba cooperates fully with the United States in the fight against terrorism, as the State Department recently admitted. The international community widely recognizes that Cuba is not a terrorist country. Cuba must be removed without further delay from that spurious and unilateral list, for it is a fallacy that has a suffocating impact on our economy. We thank all the brotherly peoples and governments represented here for their permanent support to the call for the lifting of the blockade against Cuba and the removal of our country from the aforementioned unilateral list. We also extend our deep gratitude for the expressions of solidarity towards our people after the impact of the recent weather events that hit the island. The scenario that we face in the relations with the United States has come as no surprise to Cuba. It was a probable scenario, and we had been preparing for it. But the policy of principles of the Cuban Revolution is maintained invariable. We ratify our willingness to engage in serious and responsible dialogue to advance towards a constructive and civilized relationship based on sovereign equality, mutual respect, reciprocal benefit for both peoples, despite being aware of the profound political differences between our governments. Cuba reaffirms its determination to defend its sovereign rights to build an independent, socialist future of its own, free from foreign interference and committed to peace, sustainable development, social justice, and solidarity. Dear brothers and sisters, we ratify our commitment to the defense of the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, which 10 years after its approval at the second CELAC summit held in Havana in January 2014 remains fully valid. We reiterate our solidarity with the countries gathered here, which have been the target of destabilization attempts and external interference. In particular, we reiterate our strongest support to the Bolivarian and Chavista revolution, wisely led by President Nicolás Maduro Moros, who remains determined to defend his people from the unacceptable external pressures. Questioning the institutionality and the laws of another country does not contribute to regional stability. It is up to the people of Bolívar and Chávez to decide on their future. We reiterate our full support to Commander President Daniel Ortega Saavedra and his people. The destabilizing actions against the government of national reconciliation and unity of Nicaragua must cease. To the plurinational state of Bolivia, we express our support and solidarity in the defense of its sovereignty over its natural resources and in the face of destabilizing efforts. We welcome the holding of the fourth conference of Small Island Developing States in our dear sister nation of Antigua and Barbuda. We acknowledge the results achieved and the adoption of the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Small Island Developing States, aimed at expanding cooperation, supporting debt sustainability, and the means of implementation towards these countries. The Caribbean has and will always have a friend in Cuba who will accompany them in the right to receive fair, special, and differentiated treatment, which is essential to face the growing challenges arising from the current unjust international financial system and climate change, as well as in their legitimate claim for reparations and compensations for the horrors of slavery and colonialism. We claim for a free Puerto Rico. And we maintain our solidarity with Haiti. And we have the Cuban doctors here. Distinguished comrades, the crimes of genocide, the crimes against humanity, and the crime of apartheid committed by Israel, and which have been taking shape for 75 years against the Palestinian people, have acquired extreme proportions and must stop. We reiterate our strong demand for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the illegally occupied Palestinian territories. Cuba also condemns the attacks perpetrated by Israel against friendly nations such as Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. The impunity with which the Israeli government continues to act is only possible because of the complicit political, military, logistical, and financial support provided to the occupying power by the United States government, which acts cynically and perversely, acting towards the world as a mediator in the conflict while stopping the actions of the Security Council. Cuba demands a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on the creation of two states, allowing the Palestinian people to exercise their right to self-determination and to have an independent and sovereign state within the pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital and the return of its refugees. distinguished friends. I would like to convey my appreciation to the Executive Secretariat, which has promoted in the course of this year that is coming to an end, more than 70 communiques and numerous actions to move forward in the ambitious but necessary strategic 2030 agenda. This has been a challenging year for ALBA and for Cuba, but at all times we have felt accompanied by the solidarity of all of you. In a few days, the Cuban Revolution will celebrate 66 years, and we will do it with the determination to face and to overcome the greatest challenges, as we learned in the school of Fidel, Raúl, and the heroic generation of the centennial of José Martí that precedes us. In these 66 years, the Cuban people has demonstrated that the Bambi spirit has not rested. As Antonio Maceo said, those who want to take hold of Cuba will take the dust of the soldiers in blood. Cuba will not bend a knee, and ALBA-TCP will not bend a knee. Let us make of our collective efforts a stronger and more united ALBA. May ALBA-TCP continue to advance in a constant search for realization of projects for the economic development and dignity of our America. We owe it to Bolivar and Martí, to the founding fathers of the independence of Latin America and the Caribbean. We owe it to Antonio José de Sucre, who led the troops to victory at the Battle of Ayacucho 200 years ago. And we especially owe it to Fidel, to Chavez, and to our peoples. For these 20 years of solidarity and friendship, long live ALBA-TCP. Ever onwards to victory.
Always filled with light, enthusiasm, and truth. The words of Cuba that are rising